I've been married to my husband, Daniel, for 7 years now. 7 mostly calm, grounded years that taught me what stability actually feels like, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly, but settles into your bones and stays there. If you asked me what I love most about our marriage, I'd tell you it's the quiet. The way we talk things through. The way we protect our home from outside noise. The way we chose each other without needing approval. But there has always been one exception to that peace. Daniel's sister, Kayla. When I first met her, I genuinely liked her. She was warm, funny, the kind of person who hugged too tightly and laughed a bit too loudly, but in a way that felt harmless at first. I remember thinking that I was lucky. Not everyone marries into a family where the sibling dynamic seems welcoming. That impression didn't last. Over time, little things started to surface. Subtle comments. Backhanded jokes. Long pauses where there didn't need to be any. Kayla had always imagined herself as the most important woman in Daniel's life. Not romantically, at least not in any explicit way, but emotionally. She had opinions about who he should date, who fit him, who made her feel comfortable. And comfort, to her, mattered more than his happiness. Before me, Daniel had dated one of her close friends when he was younger. It didn't last, mostly because he admitted later that he felt pressured into the relationship. When they broke up, Kayla never really let go of the idea that she should have a say in who came next. So when Daniel and I started seeing each other, she didn't attack me outright. She observed. She'd casually bring up his exes at family dinners, mentioning how well they were doing, how successful they'd become, how easy it would be for him to reconnect. She did it with a smile, always looking between us as if she were just making conversation. Daniel noticed it too. He asked her more than once to stop. She never did. If I reacted even slightly, she'd laugh and call me insecure. If I stayed quiet, she'd push harder. Once, when Daniel and I decided to move in together, she pulled him aside and told him she thought I had too many flaws to be a good long-term partner. She said she could easily find someone better for him if he gave her time. That comment stayed with me longer than I'd like to admit. When we got engaged, the rest of the family celebrated. His parents were openly happy for us. Friends hugged us, congratulated us, asked questions about dates and plans. Kayla didn't smile. She stood up halfway through the evening and left without saying a word. Later that night, Daniel got a call from her. She was crying, furious, accusing him of betraying her trust. She said she should have been the first person to know about the engagement. That she deserved that place in his life. That finding out with everyone else was humiliating. A few days later, she sent me a message. It wasn't openly threatening, but it made my stomach tighten when I read it. She reminded me that she had always been the only woman Daniel truly relied on. She warned me, gently, in her words, to treat him right. I didn't reply. That silence only made things worse. From that point on, Kayla stopped pretending. She ignored me at family gatherings, spoke over me, dismissed my opinions during wedding planning. Somehow, she still inserted herself into every detail, dress shopping, showers, decorations, criticizing almost everything while insisting she was just being honest. The breaking point came when she mocked one of my wedding choices in front of my future mother-in-law, laughing as she said it showed I had no class and that this was exactly why she'd always wanted her brother to marry someone else. Something in me snapped. I told her she was no longer welcome at our wedding. I told her I was done tolerating her constant humiliation. The room went silent. Kayla stared at me like she'd never imagined I'd push back. Daniel stood by me. Eventually, after pressure from the family and a reluctant apology that felt more strategic than sincere, she did attend the wedding. She arrived dressed entirely in black, as if she were attending a funeral. That should have been my warning. After the wedding, I did what I thought was the healthiest thing for everyone involved. I stepped back. I didn't argue with Kayla. I didn't confront her. I didn't try to repair something that had never truly been whole. I simply stopped engaging. Daniel understood. He had seen enough to know this wasn't just sibling tension or jealousy that would fade with time. What he hadn't expected was how deeply her resentment had settled, how quietly it waited for opportunities to resurface. When our son, Noah, was born, everything shifted again. Becoming a mother changes the way you see people. It sharpens your instincts. It teaches you, very quickly, where your boundaries are, and how necessary they are. I made it clear from the start that Kayla would not have unrestricted access to our child. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I needed calm. I needed safety. I needed to know that my home was not another stage for her performances. She protested, loudly. Daniel's parents didn't. They had watched her behavior for years. They knew exactly why I felt the way I did, and for the first time, they didn't try to soften it or excuse it away. They backed us completely. For a while, Kayla disappeared from our lives. Then, 2 years later, she suffered a miscarriage. It shattered her. No one in the family was untouched by that loss. Even after everything, Daniel and I felt compassion for her. Grief has a way of humbling people, and for a moment, it seemed to do exactly that. She softened. She apologized, not dramatically, not theatrically, but quietly. She started coming around again, carefully, respectfully. And what surprised me most was how gentle she was with Noah. Patient. Attentive. Almost changed. Against my better judgment, I allowed some space for her in our lives again. At first, it worked. But time has a way of revealing patterns that never truly disappear. Slowly, the conversations turned heavy again. Every visit became a monologue about how unfair life was to her. How her bosses were always against her. How friends betrayed her. How nothing ever went right, no matter how hard she tried. In every story, she was the victim. In every conflict, she was blameless. She never asked how we were doing. She watched us instead, our routines, our habits, our rhythms, like she was collecting information. When she got engaged and began planning her own wedding, we were surprised to learn that we weren't invited. Daniel called her, confused. She explained, casually, that she didn't want me there because I might cause a disturbance. When pressed, she admitted she was worried I'd show up dressed in black, just like she had at our wedding. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been exhausting. After speaking with his parents, Daniel made a decision. If she didn't want us there, then we wouldn't attend. And neither would the financial support she had assumed would come with it. That was the first time her charm failed her. She cried. She blamed me. She accused me of ruining everything. Her fiancé, James, quietly told her she was wrong, something I don't think she was used to hearing. Eventually, she apologized again. Convincingly this time. Enough that we agreed to move forward. Her wedding went smoothly. We showed up. We smiled. We played our roles. Less than 6 months later, she was at our door with a suitcase, telling us her marriage was already falling apart. We let her stay. Looking back, that decision feels like the moment we reopened a door that should have remained locked. Living with Kayla meant living under observation. She noticed everything, when I went to the gym, when I changed clothes, when I left early for work. She asked questions that felt harmless on the surface, but carried something sharper underneath. Why did I need to shower twice a day? Why did I bring extra clothes? Why was I gone so often? I answered calmly. I had nothing to hide. But she wasn't looking for answers. She was building a story. It came out during a family lunch, casually, as if she were commenting on the weather. She asked Daniel if we had signed a prenup. The table went quiet. When he said no, that we trusted each other, that we were both financially independent, she laughed and warned him how easily men were fooled. How common infidelity had become. How people never saw betrayal coming. When I asked her what she was implying, she didn't hesitate. She suggested I was cheating. She said it was her duty, as his sister, to warn him. And then, As if that wasn't enough, she joked that maybe Noah wasn't even Daniel's child. I watched my husband change in that moment. Not explode. Not yell. Something colder. He told her she had crossed a line she would never uncross. He told her she had no right to speak about our family, our child, or my character. And then he said something that stunned everyone at the table. He told her she wasn't a mother yet because she wasn't ready to be one. She ran to the bathroom in tears. After that day, we cut contact completely. For nearly a year, our lives were quiet again. And then, without planning, without trying, I found out I was pregnant. Finding out I was pregnant again felt unreal. We hadn't been trying. Life had been busy, full, already overflowing in ways that felt complete. And yet, there it was, a quiet, unexpected gift that arrived without asking for permission. Daniel was stunned when I told him. Not overwhelmed. Not anxious. Just, still. The kind of stillness that comes when something lands too deep for words. Then he smiled, wrapped his arms around me, and whispered that we were incredibly lucky. We decided to wait before telling anyone. Not because we were afraid, but because we wanted to choose the moment carefully. With our history, with the fragile peace we had rebuilt, timing mattered. Daniel's birthday felt right. His parents offered to host a small gathering in their backyard, nothing extravagant, just close family and friends, good food, laughter, the kind of evening that drifts by gently. We agreed, already imagining how we'd share the news once everyone was settled, once the energy felt safe. I hadn't expected Kayla to be there. When she arrived, my stomach tightened instinctively. Daniel felt it too. He squeezed my hand, a silent question in his eyes. She went straight to him, hugged him tightly, told him how much she'd missed him, how sorry she was for the way things had ended between them. Then she turned to me. She apologized. Publicly. Calmly. She said she had been in therapy for months. That she finally understood how inappropriate and hurtful her behavior had been. That she wanted to make things right. I didn't believe her. But I nodded anyway. It wasn't the place to reopen old wounds. This was Daniel's day, and I refused to let the past hijack it again. His parents quietly checked in with us, making it clear that if we felt uncomfortable, Kayla would be asked to leave. Daniel asked them not to intervene. She'll behave, he said. If she doesn't, we handle it later. For most of the evening, she did. She laughed with relatives. Made small talk. Played the role so convincingly that part of me wondered, briefly, if therapy really had changed her. I wanted to believe it. I wanted peace more than I wanted to be right. When Daniel stood to speak, the yard fell quiet. He talked about gratitude. About family. About how lucky he felt to be surrounded by people who had supported him through every stage of his life. Then he looked at me, his voice softening, and said he couldn't imagine walking through the years ahead without me by his side. I felt my face warm. The same way it had when we first fell in love. When the moment felt right, we shared our news. We were having a baby. For a second, there was silence, the kind that hangs in the air just long enough to make your heart skip, and then everything erupted. Cheers. Tears. Hugs. Questions. My mother rushed toward me, crying openly. Daniel's father clapped him on the back, pride written all over his face. Everyone celebrated. Everyone except Kayla. She froze. Her smile vanished. Her shoulders stiffened. Without saying a word, she turned away from us, irritation flashing across her face before she masked it again. I told myself not to overthink it. Pregnancy announcements can stir complicated emotions, especially for someone who had suffered a loss. I tried to give her grace, to assume the best. As the crowd thinned and people settled back into conversation, I stayed seated while Daniel went to grab me a plate of food. His parents insisted I rest, joking that I wasn't allowed to lift a finger. That's when Kayla approached me. She was smiling again. Brightly. Almost eagerly. She told me she was genuinely happy for us. That she wanted to make up for all the times she'd been cruel. That this baby felt like a fresh start for everyone. Then she handed me a plate. She said she had made it herself and wanted me to have the first serving. I thanked her, out of politeness more than trust. As I looked down, my heart dropped. Shrimp. My allergy isn't dramatic, but it's serious enough that I avoid it entirely. Kayla knew that. Everyone in the family did. I stood up immediately, shaking my head, and told her I couldn't eat it. I assumed it was a careless mistake, another example of her never really paying attention to details that didn't serve her. I went to get myself something else. Before I could, James approached me, congratulating me warmly on the pregnancy. When he noticed I wasn't eating, I explained quickly and apologized for wasting the plate. He waved it off, laughed, and told me he'd take it. I hesitated for half a second. Then I handed it to him. I didn't know, in that moment, that I had just stepped out of the path of something far darker than I could have imagined. It didn't happen instantly. At first, nothing felt wrong. People were still talking, laughing, drifting between tables with paper plates and plastic cups. Daniel was standing a few steps away, watching me with that quiet attentiveness he'd had ever since we found out I was pregnant. Then James went pale. At first, it was subtle, the kind of change you might miss if you weren't looking directly at someone. His smile faltered. His shoulders tensed. He pressed a hand to his chest as if he were suddenly short of breath. Someone joked that maybe the food had gone bad. Then he gagged. The sound cut through the yard like a knife. James dropped the plate. He bent forward, retching violently, barely managing to turn away from the table. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Chairs scraped against the ground as people stood up, confused, alarmed. Within seconds, he collapsed. I remember the way the world narrowed in that moment, the sound of my own heartbeat, the weight in my stomach, the sudden certainty that something was very, very wrong. Daniel was at his side instantly. So were his parents. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Kayla rushed forward too, her face twisted in panic, kneeling beside her husband. James couldn't speak. He gestured weakly toward the fallen plate, then toward his throat. That's when the realization hit me so hard my knees nearly buckled. That plate had been meant for me. Kayla looked up at me, her eyes sharp despite the chaos. She asked, loudly, if I had given James my food. I nodded, barely able to breathe. The ambulance arrived quickly. James was rushed to the hospital, unconscious. The rest of us were left standing in the backyard, surrounded by untouched food and shattered celebration. No one understood what had happened yet. But the word poison hung unspoken between us. Later that night, the call came. The doctors confirmed that James had ingested a toxic substance. They couldn't identify it immediately, only that it was something deliberately added to the food. I felt the room spin. That plate hadn't just endangered me. It could have harmed my unborn child. The police were notified. Questions followed. Who prepared the food? Who handled the plate? Who had eaten from it? I didn't tell anyone the full truth that night. I was shaking too badly. Terrified of what it meant. Terrified of what Kayla might do if she realized I suspected her. Daniel held me as I cried, assuming my fear was about the baby. He didn't know yet that his sister had been the one to hand me the plate. That night, his parents insisted on staying with us. They were shaken, unsettled, afraid to be alone after what had happened in their own backyard. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw James collapsing. I replayed the moment I handed him the plate over and over again, my chest tightening with guilt. If I had thrown it away. If I had said no. If I had trusted my instincts. The next morning, calls started coming in. Relatives wanted answers. Friends wanted reassurance. No one could understand how a birthday celebration had turned into a medical emergency. I knew I couldn't stay silent. The cameras around Daniel's parents' house had been installed years earlier, mostly for security. They covered the backyard, the serving tables, the paths people took as they moved through the space. That evening, I sat down with Daniel and his parents and told them everything. I told them about the plate, about the shrimp, about Kayla handing it to me personally. The room went silent. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't defend her. His face changed slowly, disbelief giving way to something darker as the weight of my words settled in. His mother was the first to speak. She suggested checking the footage. We watched it together. There was no ambiguity. The camera clearly showed Kayla preparing the plate separately, adding something to it, carrying it straight to me, handing it over with a smile. And then, moments later, James taking it from my hands. No one spoke when the video ended. Daniel stood up and left the room without a word. His father contacted the police that night and turned over the footage. James was still in the hospital when officers came to take statements. I cried harder than I had in years, overwhelmed by guilt, fear, and the horrifying realization that someone in our family had deliberately tried to harm me. And possibly my child. James survived. The doctors told us he was lucky. The amount of poison in his system had been enough to cause serious damage, but not enough to kill him. Hearing that didn't bring relief the way I expected it to. Instead, it left me shaking with the knowledge of how close everything had come to ending very differently. The police arrested Kayla within days. When they questioned her, she didn't deny it for long. Faced with the footage, with the medical reports, with the reality of what she had done, she broke down. She admitted she had tampered with the food. She admitted it was meant for me. She said she never intended to hurt the baby. She said she just wanted to teach me a lesson. She said she lost control. None of it mattered. James pressed charges. That decision ended their marriage. Quietly, almost mercifully. There were no dramatic scenes after that, just paperwork, signatures, and the slow dismantling of something that should never have existed in the first place. Daniel made it clear to James that, no matter what, he would still be family to us. And somehow, that mattered more than any apology Kayla could have offered. Kayla tried to reach out from jail. She cried. She blamed me. She begged her parents to help her, reminding them that she was pregnant too, that they were about to become grandparents again. It didn't work. For the first time in her life, they didn't protect her from consequences. She was convicted. The court acknowledged years of escalating behavior, intent, and the undeniable evidence. She was sentenced to prison, and a restraining order was put in place to keep her away from me and my children permanently. I never attended the hearings. I didn't need to see her face to know the truth. What stayed with me wasn't anger, it was fear. For months, I couldn't eat food I hadn't prepared myself. I checked labels obsessively. I replayed the moment with the plate in my head until my doctor gently suggested therapy, reminding me that trauma doesn't disappear just because justice is served. Our daughter was born healthy. Holding her for the first time felt like stepping into the light after years of shadow. Noah adored her instantly, hovering close, protective in a way only children can be. Watching them together healed something in me that I didn't realize was still broken. Our home is quiet now. Safe. Kayla is no longer part of our lives, and she never will be again. James is rebuilding. Daniel and I are stronger than we've ever been, not because we survived something terrible, but because we refused to let it define us. Some stories don't end with apologies. They end with understanding. If this story felt familiar, you're not alone. Thank you for listening. This was Block Tales.